once again, we sit down for a conversation we call Attempted Intelligence. I think we've done a reasonable job going over the stuff that makes up the philosophy of science. So over time, I think one of the things that we shall do is maybe choose areas to consider, maybe not always directly related back to the philosophy of science and how it informs the discussion, but it's the undercurrent, at least for me.
Okay.
I don't know how often you really touch on those things and map those onto concepts in your daily life, but for me...
Is that an attempt at far transfer?
You son of a gun. Yes.
Okay.
The deep features of concepts, those things which cannot be directly touched, they're not directly tangible. There's no agreement on what deep features are in the literature, but they can generally be seen as problem-solving schema, right? Plots in books, things of that nature, problem-solving skills, stuff like that. Well done. Thank you for making me recall. Anyways, topically, I brought this up to you, and I wasn't necessarily trying to be particularly directive, but just the concept of how geography impacts things.
Okay.
And obviously we're going to think a little bit more about people.
Yeah.
But because, we're humans and, we're selfish and stuff like that. So, but it doesn't necessarily just impact humans, because if you consider animal life and plant life, do you see the same plants at the top of Mount Everest as you do in the Indus Valley? No. Do you see any plants at the top of Mount Everest?
I don't know. I haven't been there, but yes.
Thank you. I was like, I really hope you say you've never been there. If you have, you have some explaining to do, man. Yeah. So, think about things such as, what happens to the air when you live at higher elevations, or when you go to higher elevations? What happens?
My understanding is that it's thinner.
Okay, so that's usually what people say.
Yeah.
Realistically, the pressure is different.
Okay.
So there is what's called the partial pressure of oxygen. So within your blood, there's this thing called, also like the partial pressure matters, because the pressure of your blood has to be at a certain level when it hits your lung, when it's right by the alveoli, which is a little sac inside, so that you can have the transfer, because it requires a pressure gradient to transfer. So basically, like which direction do things transfer? Which direction do things move along a pressure gradient? From what pressure to what pressure?
They usually go from the higher pressure to the low pressure.
Yes.
To balance out.
So the pressure outside of you has to be higher than the pressure inside of you. If I remember right, and I'm not completely on, but the partial pressure of oxygen, or like essentially at that point, it needs to take it in, it's somewhere around 90 or 95.
Okay.
And I'm definitely not spot on with that number. I haven't looked it up in a long time. I mean, years. Okay. But basically there's a pressure differential that's required, otherwise you can't load and offload.
Does that mean if the pressure is too low outside of you, you would have trouble breathing?
Yes.
Okay.
So what happens when you go up?
Well, you have trouble breathing.
Yeah. It's not because the air is thinner. That's a proxy or something close to saying that the molecules are farther away from one another. If they're farther away from one another, right? So let's just say I have 100 molecules and I put them in something this size, right? Who cares what that pressure is? Say it's 1.
Okay.
What happened now? What happened to the pressure?
Well, it's less than 1.
There you go. So essentially when they're able to be farther apart, it means the pressure is lower. So as you go to higher altitudes, the pressure is lower. So it's harder to transfer the oxygen into and out of the blood in the lung, because the pressure differential isn't the same as at lower altitudes.
That makes sense, because my only other understanding of higher altitudes is in relation to water. And atmospheric pressure is, I'm assuming, lower at the higher altitude.
Well, there's less of it above you.
Right. So that water boils at a lower temperature. And that would make sense now. So, yeah.
So, if you put a life form that is used to living close to sea level at a very high altitude, is that going to change its ability to function?
Yes.
Now, if you give it long enough and it adapts to that environment, is it functionally different than its compatriot that lives at a lower altitude?
I believe so.
Okay, so think about athletics.
Okay.
Have you heard about what people will do, especially for endurance events, with respect to training? Right?
No, I haven't.
You never heard that people used to try to train at higher elevations because essentially force you to have, higher capillary density, right? So now what they do is they say train low, sleep high, right? So have you heard about athletes sleeping in hyperbaric chambers?
Yes.
Yeah, the hyperbaric tents. That's because what they're trying to do is get the benefit of the reduced pressure, and then while you're resting, not while you're training, but while you're resting, you're trying to get your body to increase capillary density, right? That's what you're trying to do. How well it works is questionable, but it used to be train high, live low, right? Because there is a difference, right? So if you're always at that height, when you come down, for endurance events, seems fine,
right.
But for other events, it's not the same. In sprinting, I can't remember what the particular altitude cutoff is, but there's what are called altitude records. So Mexico City, so the 1968 Olympics, the altitude, I don't remember what it is. I think it's 3,000 feet or 5,000 feet, but it's elevated. So
they held the event at that height?
Yeah, in Mexico City.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Mexico City. It's higher. Then it's considerably higher than sea level. But Jim Hines ran 995, but it was 995 altitude. So essentially, once you hit that altitude mark, it is believed that it's going to drop about 1/10 of a second off your time in 100 meters.
Okay.
So if you run 995, you go down to sea level, it's expected generally that you run 1005. Right. So athletically, there are differences in where you perform and where you train. So geography, right, makes a difference. If you happen to live in an area that is elevated above sea level, there's something going to happen. The further up you go, the more of a thing is going to happen. Right?
But that would affect, even just in the example that you were talking about, if someone was coming from a different country to train, or they're training and that's where they train, and then they come to another country.
Forget about country.
Geography. They go to a different
geographical situation
to compete, then they're either at an advantage or disadvantage depending on...
Possibly.
Right.
Most people are savvy enough that that's not going to be that much of a deal. Make sense?
Yes.
Right? Because with performance, when it's part of your livelihood, you're going to pay a little more attention. You're going to be pretty savvy.
Like I know that the geography is going to be different over here. It's going to affect
that.
So
Yeah. And depending on the type of event, be it shorter in time scale or longer in time scale, you'll plan appropriately. Now, think about differences in altitude with respect to transportation. Okay, let's just say you're on Mount Everest. You need to be rescued. Can they send a plane for you?
I don't think so.
Because how would they land and pick you up,
Yeah.
right? I don't think there's all that many pilots that can fly close enough to get a rope and then have you grab it when you're infirmed and it's just not going to work. And then you're flying and this isn't going to work.
Right.
Can you fly a helicopter most of the way up Mount Everest?
I believe you can.
No, you cannot.
No?
Why not?
Because of wind?
No. What happened to the air?
Oh, got thinner.
The air pressure
is
changed.
different, yes.
So the motion of the rotor,
right,
or really the wing, it's a moving wing is what it's called. Like, so you call it a rotor, you call it a moving wing. Right. So an airplane is a fixed wing, helicopter is a moving wing. The air pressure has changed, therefore it basically doesn't have enough to work against.
It can't get the resistance to...
Okay, so on air transit, are there difficulties with specific geography?
Yes.
Right? If you live in the mountains and it's too high to land to fly a helicopter, and there's nowhere flat to land a plane, can we get you through the air?
Oh no.
There is one way. How would you do it? Well, there's two ways really. Okay. You could use a parasail.
Okay.
Right?
So they have to attach the person to them and then...
No. Well,
but you're getting...
No, let's just say you're in good health.
Okay.
Right? You strap a parasail on. Out by your house, the people have the big rotor fans, right? So you could do that. Well, I don't know if you could do that at that height. The parasail would work.
Right.
The motor might not.
Right. Because if the helicopter doesn't work, then...
Maybe, but that's also horizontal. That's perpendicular to you.
Right.
Or more or less. Anyways. Yeah, parallel to the ground.
Yes.
Right, parallel to the ground is the air movement. You possibly, under the right circumstances, and with a lot of luck, use a balloon of some sort, right? But is that easy?
No.
Okay, so geography
Right.
makes a difference. Now, let's just say you live high enough elevation, no real flat land, but you can, based on the topography of the mountain, create a road.
Okay.
Okay, can you trust that that road's always going to be in good repair?
No.
Why not?
Well, just I feel like the geography of the
What
terrain.
happens to mountains?
Well, they deteriorate.
They change.
They change.
Yeah, like wind,
Yeah.
erosion,
Yeah.
stuff's gonna happen. Okay,
Right.
so
And the maintenance is going to be poor if it's that high, and there's not.
okay. Now let's just say you live elevated, right? You have some roads, but the common problems because in Hamilton,
Mhm.
the escarpment passes like the what do they call them?
With like going up and
The accesses.
Yeah, the access
Yeah.
going up and down the.
Yeah, yeah. They call them accesses.
Okay.
I really struggle to say what they actually call them.
Yeah.
It's a cliff,
Yeah.
which is also called an escarpment, and they call them mountain
Mountains.
accesses.
Yeah.
On like the actual census forms, it's mountain east and mountain west.
Yeah.
It's not a mountain. Just stop it. But that's what it's called.
Mhm.
But yeah, the mountain accesses, are all of them open and functioning right now?
I don't think all of them, but
There's one that's permanently closed. I don't remember which one it is, but it's closer to the James.
I was gonna say most of them are.
Yeah. But you know, is there not erosion on all of them?
Yeah, there's always signs and pylons from
Yeah, lanes taken out.
landslides and things like
Yes.
that.
And that's a fairly stable cliff face.
Yeah.
Right?
I live near one. I go down one on a regular basis.
So just say higher than that. Right?
Okay.
And not a lot of flat places. Are you going to have good access to all forms of service?
Coming to me.
Or being able to get to
Get
it?
to it. No.
No. Where do you put it? Right. Do you know that there is an observation that people who live at higher elevations around the world tend to have lower levels of education and literacy as well as socioeconomic success?
I did not know that.
Do you remember hearing anything, even not necessarily directly, clearly, but like hillbillies?
Okay.
Right? What if I say hillbilly to you? Do you think of a sophisticated, intelligent person?
No, I do not.
Okay. What's the first word?
Hill.
Hill.
Mhm.
Up. Okay. That observation seems consistent around the world. Right? It just does.
Mhm.
There is difficulty transporting things to you and you transporting yourself to things.
Right.
There is difficulty accessing institutions because the institutions are going to have a hard time, first of all, being willing to be built in a precarious geographical situation.
Right.
Also, if there's not that many people, why the hell am I going to build it there?
Right.
Right? Like I'm going to build a schoolhouse for 20 kids in 2021.
Right.
It doesn't mean there's no value in it. It just means it's very less likely,
Right.
a lot less likely to happen. So, people who live at higher elevations, just observably, it's not genetic.
Right.
They just don't have the same access to
Access
things,
to those things.
right? Now, look at, take a country like Japan. If I say Japan and I say diet, okay, what are the things that pop to mind fairly fast? And this isn't, a test where it's like, oh my god, I can't believe you didn't think the thing I thought. But in your understanding of Japan,
Mhm.
what do you think the staples in the diet are?
Well, I just feel there's rice,
Uh-huh.
there's noodles, there's fish, there's those types of things.
Yeah, so, is the noodles made of rice?
Sometimes, yes.
They're mostly rice noodles.
Are they? I don't know. Because I know you can make it out of different things. So
You can, but think about what they make.
if they have access to
Yeah.
lots of rice, then
But rice and seafood,
Mhm.
right? I believe there's no point in Japan where you're farther than 70 kilometers from the ocean,
Wow.
right? Also, I've told you that Japan surprised me when I went. I didn't think about this before, but when I was flying over it, it's all mountains. They're everywhere. It's an extremely mountainous country. That's why you have large cities. So essentially you have floodplains, and a bunch of people live there. The greater Tokyo area. So not the city of Tokyo proper, but the Tokyo census area.
Right.
It's 37 million people. I believe that's essentially the population of Canada. But they have to live there because Japan's seismic activity, right? Yeah. There's regular earthquakes.
Right.
If you live on a mountain and there's a lot of earthquakes, what's going to happen to your house?
Yeah, bad things.
It falls down. They tend to live in the floodplains. And also, Japanese architecture does not tend to be particularly tall, right? Compared to other countries of similar economic status, right? They don't build as high. Also, the majority of structures, especially living structures that are vertical, their staircases are on the outside of the building. They are somewhat enclosed, there's walls, but they tend to be on the outside of the building so that when you're trying to escape, there's openings that they can get to you if stuff collapses. Right. You're not stuck in the middle of a collapsed building. Right. You're at least somewhat on the outside of the collapsed building, right? They think about this. Right. Their architecture is different because of seismic activity in relation to geography, and they live on floodplains because otherwise you're on a mountain that's going to allow your house to slide down. So the diet is affected by the location. Also, let's just say you want to raise animals for meat. Where do you do it in Japan? Like where do you do it? You do it on those floodplains. Right. Obviously, there's some opportunity to do it, but there's less land. That land is at a higher premium. Right. There's people and there's animals, and then there's fish. Right. So there's lots of fish.
Right. So it's the access as well. So it's like I'm going to go towards
the trade-offs.
Right.
Right. So their architecture is different. Right. It has no choice. Did you notice this winter in Texas when they had that quick snowstorm? What happened to their power grid?
No.
So there was essentially like horrible flooding, and their power grid more or less went down. There are some parts of Texas that do get snow on a somewhat regular basis, seasonally. Right. The majority of Texas doesn't. So then all of Texas gets snow, and then their houses like fall apart. Wow. But why would that be?
Because they're not designed for...
Because it doesn't happen consistently, right? Florida, which way are doors mandated to open?
I was going to mention that because I was very shocked when I went there.
Yeah.
I thought that their door was put on backwards, but they actually open out because of the high winds from hurricanes.
Yeah, so if the door is built to open in, you put enough pressure on the outside and something breaks, it opens. Yeah. But if you hinge it the other way, it's not impossible for the wind to break it or something to hit it, but it's much less likely. Right. It's just not built to do it, right? So if a house is built to code in Florida, the door is different than in the GTA.
Because they're planning for
their geography and their weather, right? So is geography equal across the world?
What do you mean equal? Like equally affecting? Or
no. Does everybody have access to the same geography that will impact them in the exact same way everywhere in the world?
Well, no.
Not even remotely. Does geography impact climate to some degree?
Yes.
The further up you go, the colder it generally gets. Depending on the prevailing winds, the side of a mountain that you're on is going to have a very different amount of precipitation. Yeah. Right? Like it's going to, on the side that is closer to a large body of water, you'll get more water. Right. On the other side, less water. Right? Less precipitation, generally speaking. Not exclusively, but generally. Right? Calgary. Have you ever heard of the Chinooks?
I've heard of them.
Okay, do you know what they are?
I can't remember.
So essentially, the best way to put it is whatever season it is, it's going to be the opposite when it hits. So it'll be the middle of January, there'll be snow everywhere, and it'll be 17 degrees Celsius. Right. Like that. Because the winds come through the Rockies. Right. So is climate equal for each individual around the world, everywhere, no matter where you go, right now?
No.
Has it ever been?
I'm gonna assume no.
There's no time where the planet is equally temperate, has the same amount of precipitation, the same flora and fauna, right? Are animals the same in every place? No. Can you have an animal that lives at sea level and a very similar animal that lives at a much higher elevation, and they're essentially the same species, but they're going to be different, right?
Yeah, they're going to be,
Unless that animal's adapted to do this. Right. So is climate or geography equal?
No.
It's never going to be. Right?
Right.
Have you heard the commentary in the general media talking about climate change and how it's going to unequally impact people in certain places.
Yes.
So if you consider the current state of affairs, the historical state of affairs, is that an argument that would fit well in positivism?
Let me think here. So, constructivism is based on the observer?
Many truths based on the observer. Positivism essentially would be one truth regardless of the observer.
So,
And usually constructivism finds commonalities between disparate things.
right.
So between those many realities, constructivism, when done well, finds the similarity. Positivism, although believing in one reality regardless of observer, tends to find variation.
Okay. So you're asking if the idea that
Climate
climate
change
change
is unequally affecting certain populations.
well, that's a truth. Like within a positive and
Okay, so
that mindset, wouldn't it be that one truth that it is affecting?
no, so is climate change targeting the global south, the global north?
Oh.
Like, is it like poorer countries?
See, I thought it was your understanding of that it is different and
Yeah, no.
affecting. I'm
So-
like, yes, it is.
Yeah, so here's the deal. The argument that you generally hear, that climate change is unequally affecting, so a term that you're unequally affecting people in poorer countries, in countries where skin color is notably different, right?
Yeah.
I don't know of any country that doesn't have people of multiple skin colors anymore. I just don't know of any.
Yeah, I don't know.
Obviously, some are predominantly
Right.
people of certain skin
But
colors
of-
like this.
Yeah.
But that's real,
Yes.
right? But the idea that people of particular skin colors are unequally impacted by climate change, does that argument map well onto positivism?
Well, I'm going to say...
Especially in a grander scale, in the historical scale.
I'm not making the connection.
Okay,
I'm,
that's fine.
I can't see
And
that.
maybe the way that I'm saying it isn't allowing for that. But is there an argument to be made that climate has ever been equal?
There's an argument to say that it's never been equal.
Okay, so you responded on the other side. Yes or no? Is there a historical argument to be made that climate has ever impacted human beings equally?
No.
There's no argument
No.
for that. There's just no such thing. It's not possible.
Right.
Based on observation at any point.
Right.
It's just not possible.
Throughout history.
Okay? So could you call that a singular abstract reality, that climate is unequal all the time?
Yes.
Geography is unequal all the time.
Yes.
Okay? For all kinds of reasons.
Yes.
So, that would be the positivist argument.
Is that one truth?
That it's always unequal.
It's always unequal.
Right? So the argument that climate change is going to unequally impact people in particular areas who have grievances with the way that certain things seem to run,
Right.
is that a positivist argument?
It's unequal.
So essentially, you're from, I don't know, southern land,
Okay.
whatever it is, right? And because you're in southern land, there's ice.
Okay.
Okay? And because of climate change, the ice is receding faster. That is going to impact the way that your land functions.
Right.
Life is going to change somewhat. You know, you're going to have more mud.
Right.
You're going to possibly have more infrastructure collapse.
Right.
Right? And I'm in a place where I'm from northern, middle land.
Okay.
Right? So I'm in an area where the climate shifts more regularly. You're usually cold. Mine has more so 4 clear seasons.
Right.
Right? I'll have, your normal 4 seasons.
Right.
So I'm used to building for that shift.
Right.
You're used to building for cold.
Right.
Okay? that is going to impact us unevenly.
Yeah.
Because I built for 4 seasons, you built for 1.5.
Yeah.
Right? But is the climate already impacting us unequally?
Yes.
It's already doing that.
Right.
Right? So the ability to foresee these things, right? It matters, but if you've built a certain way for 1,000 years, do you want to build differently now?
Not really.
You just don't want to. You don't want to.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Right.
It's like, my grandfather did this. My grandmother literally created this technology.
So the argument for a positive is essentially, yeah, there is an argument because it's always affected us historically. It's always.
So nothing is changing in the unequal distribution of climate impact.
Right.
Nothing's changing.
Right.
The particulars of the climate impact will shift.
Right.
Right. But the phenomenon remains steady. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the people arguing for, it's hurting me more than it's hurting you, are those people who believe in many realities or people who believe in one?
I'm just going to say that's many realities.
Yes.
Because
So they'd be a little bit further to the constructivist side.
Right.
I'm just going to tell you, instead of trying to pull teeth, they're postmodernists. Does a postmodernist have any place arguing about climate?
Do they have?
Do they have any foot to stand on to argue about climate?
Well, no.
Why not?
Because it's always affected us unequally.
It's not about that. Postmodernists do not believe in a singular reality.
Mm-hmm.
They don't believe in consensus whatsoever. They are skeptical of any scientific claim.
Mm-hmm.
So how in the heck are they arguing about climate?
Can't.
No, they can.
But.
And they are.
Right.
But do they have a leg to stand on? Does it fit? Does it even make sense within their epistemology?
No, based on what you just said.
No. So if you've got somebody trying to talk to you about the inequality of climate impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who doesn't believe in any form of consensus, they literally are skeptical of the scientific method.
Right.
What's going on?
Yeah, I have a problem with that. But essentially they're...
So do they have a right to make their argument?
Yeah.
Yes, they have a right to make their argument. But they're utilizing things that are outside of their realm that require objectivity, and they don't believe in objectivity, they believe in subjectivity.
But isn't that what you said the postmodernist does? They kind of just pull whatever is convenient at any time?
Not absolutely. Yeah,
for their argument?
they slide.
Right,
Yeah,
they
slide.
shift a lot.
Yeah, but if you're stealing from things you don't agree with, come on, like have some scruples.
Yeah.
So, does that help? Some of that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Right, so you're going to encounter more and more people making arguments saying this is unequal, this is unequal, this is unequal. It's like, okay, hold on. What epistemology are you arguing from? Right? Okay. My general contention is that if something lines up on many epistemologies and has some, like people would say, okay, I can dig that in many epistemologies, there's probably more value.
Okay.
But if all epistemologies disagree on the topic, what the heck is happening?
Right.
I'm like, no, we're not doing anything here. We're just going to fight.
Right.
Right? So it's like, let's find something that goes equally on, or not equally, that has predictive power or has validity. It's doing what it says it does in many epistemologies.
Yeah.
Right? So
or at
realistically,
least more than...
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So climate has never been equal. Geography has never been equal. These are real things. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Fair enough.